perspective presented by the New Orleans Secular Humanist Association, following our few principles of humanism.
We're committed to the use of science and reason for understanding the universe and for solving human problems. We're skeptical of untested claims of knowledge, but we're open to new ideas.
We are concerned with securing justice and fairness in society and in ending intolerance and discrimination. We are committed to the total separation of religion and government.
We affirm humanism as a realistic alternative to the theologies of despair and the ideologies of violence. We reject the concept of an afterlife and believe in living a full and rewarding life here and now.
We value and respect each individual's right to judge and lead their lives according to their own position, as long as it's respectful of other people, living in a free society.
We hope you enjoy today's program and others in the weeks to follow. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Harry Greenberger, host for the show. My guest today has been with us before. It's Marjorie Esman, who is the executive director of the Louisiana A.C.L.U, American Civil Liberties Union. And we have a number of things to talk about today. I think the first one, Marjorie, I'd like to talk about is what has happened, is happening, and is going to happen in the Louisiana State Legislature this session.
I wish I could predict the future. If I could tell you what's going to happen, I probably wouldn't be sitting here now. But, I guess the bill that is going to probably be the most interest to this audience is the one that fortunately failed, which was the proposal to make the Bible the state book.
Fortunately, as a matter of fact, I thought that one would pass.
I did too. And I think what happened with it was when it started, it was a proposal, and the sort of pretext was that it was tied to a specific document. There was a particular item that is held in the Louisiana State Library that is ostensibly the oldest object that exists in that library, and it happens to be a Bible.
And that was the original.
That was the original proposal, and the pretext was that it was about honoring this old thing that belongs to the state. But that was clearly pretext, and then as it got amended, it came out that it was going to be the Holy Bible. Any version, because then it was the King James Bible, but of course the Catholics were upset because that's not the one that the Catholics use, and so it would be clearly discriminating against a very sizable number of people in the state, and so it was amended to be the Holy Bible, but not...
That meaning the Old and the New Testament?
I believe so, but
right.
but there was an amendment that didn't pass, which was to make any religious text, which of course is still a problem for people who don't adhere to religion.
Religion, yeah.
But that, of course, didn't clear. And so what came out of committee was the Holy Bible, without any even pretense of a secular justification, because it was no longer tied to something that you could say is the oldest object that we have in the Louisiana State Library or museum or wherever it was. And so it became a political problem. And so the sponsor of it just pulled the bill.
Had it passed, it would have not been a violation of the First Amendment, separation of government from religion.
Of course
it wouldn't have. It wouldn't have withstood your law case against it.
Well, fortunately, we don't have to test it.
Okay. Well, so that one we got lucky.
We got lucky on that one. Right?
I don't know how lucky we were other than that.
Yeah.
What else has been up there?
It's been a tough year. The idea that I'm sure everybody remembers that about a year ago there was a spate of arrests in Baton Rouge for people who weren't even violating the unconstitutional law prohibiting sodomy, because what they really were doing was sort of making dates essentially in a public park, and being set up on grounds that they intended to violate the sodomy law, which of course is unconstitutional anyway. And it was a huge embarrassment for the Baton Rouge Police Department. when the district attorney said, we can't prosecute these cases because they haven't broken any law that we can, that's still valid, and what we really need to do is repeal this unconstitutional law, which, of course, has been unconstitutional for a decade or so, and it's an embarrassment that it's still on the books. And so, there was a bill to repeal this invalid, unconstitutional, discriminatory law under which people were wrongly arrested.
Yes.
But
no, they didn't repeal it.
No.
How long has that been on the state books?
Oh, a long time. But
decades.
But it was struck down in 2000, 10 years ago or so with the the Supreme Court decision, and so it's not enforceable. But and why we would keep a law on the books that is unenforceable makes no sense.
Of course,
Except that you had was, the Louisiana Family Forum and the evangelical lobby coming in and saying, we don't want to say anything that looks like we're condoning homosexuality, and so therefore, even though we can't enforce it, we want this as a statement of our principles.
And was it a sizable vote that,
yes.
was?
Yes.
So
yes.
There wasn't much chance of that getting, okay.
No,
well,
so we have another,
so
illegal law.
One down.
Right.
What else?
Right. And as part of a package of trying to reform Louisiana's unconscionable criminal justice system, which of course we all know locks up more of our own people than any place else on the planet, and many of them for really trivial reasons. We at the ACLU have been really trying to get at overly punitive drug laws, and particularly with respect to marijuana. Last year we had a little bit of success and almost got through a very modest and ultimately not very effective and didn't pass anyway marijuana reform bill. And it started a larger conversation that led to a whole panoply of bills that would have significantly reformed the marijuana law, including a proposal to implement the law that already is in existence. People don't realize that in 1991, Louisiana legalized medical marijuana.
No, I was not aware of that myself.
1991, there's a law in the books that legalizes medical marijuana for 3 conditions: glaucoma, chemotherapy, and what's described as spastic quadriplegia. But there's never been any regulatory mechanism whereby if you get a prescription, you could fill it. That was supposed to have happened by 1992, but for reasons that I don't think anybody really knows anymore, it never happened.
If so, let me ask that. If it were legal to use it for those medical purposes, and someone acquired their marijuana illegally for a medical purpose, would they have been subject to some sort of legal action?
Well, that's an interesting question, and there is at least one case that I know of, and there may be many others, but there's one case that I know of exactly that. A man who had a prescription from another state, I'm not sure what other state, was arrested in Louisiana for possession of marijuana, although what the law says is that if you have marijuana pursuant to a legally obtained prescription, then you can't be prosecuted, and that is his defense. As far as I know, it's still working its way through the courts, but that's exactly a very interesting question. But the fact is that even though Louisiana since 1991 has allowed doctors to prescribe marijuana, there's been no mechanism for you to fill a prescription that your doctor might give you if you meet one of the criteria. And so there was a bill to essentially create that mechanism so that you could get a prescription that would be a meaningful prescription, and you could actually get the medicine that your doctor would authorize for you to have. And that one didn't make it out of committee. And it was really outrageous, honestly, that what, a matter of medical treatment for sick people became a political pawn, and that's what happened.
Yes, I can understand. Well, in anticipation of your being my guest, I had, just clipped some things out of the newspaper. This one says, lawmakers hear case for legal marijuana, and there were cases, some of which were medical, and some of them just, for general approval. Another headline said, Senate panel kills pot bill. and I guess it should have said bills, because there were numerous bills proposed for some form of legalization.
No, not legalization. Now, let's be very clear.
All right.
There has been no proposal to legalize marijuana other than to implement the medical marijuana that's already legal in Louisiana. But with respect to recreational use, all of the bills are about reforming the criminal penalties so that it would still be a crime to possess marijuana, but the penalties, I mean, right now, on a third offense marijuana, you can get up to 20 years.
For possession?
For possession if it's your third offense.
Yeah.
Up to 20 years at Angola for something that people do all the time in the privacy of their homes and it hurts no one. And so all of these bills would be to change those draconian sentences. You know, a range of one of them, the most conservative one, I think would reduce the 20 years to 8 years. Which is still a ridiculously long period of time.
But didn't they then want to make first possession like a misdemeanor?
It already is. Right now, first possession is a misdemeanor. There was one bill that would make any possession basically a misdemeanor. $100 fine, 6 months in jail, for no matter how many times.
So some of these proposals were quite modest.
Yeah, well, the one of them...
Even so, none of them were approved.
Right.
What sort of... Did they get out of committee? Any of them get out of committee?
Last year, yes. This year, no.
And what committee is that keeps turning them down?
Well, there are several of them. The medical one, of course, went to the Health and Welfare Committee, which is, a little different because it was about medicine. The other ones, the recreational ones, are criminal justice committees. The House Criminal Justice, it's known as Jude C. It's the Judiciary C Committee. The chair of that committee is Representative Kostelka, who is adamantly opposed to any kind of drug reform. I mean, he just really strongly believes that drugs are the scourge of society, and he just will not entertain, to the extent that he can control it, anything that has to do with drug reform.
Is that coming from his philosophical position or religious position?
Well, I don't know. I don't know I don't know that it makes a difference.
Well, it doesn't, except that so much of what happens up there is under the influence of those religious organizations.
Well, they haven't weighed in on this. The Louisiana Family Forum and they've been very quiet on all of the criminal justice reform stuff. They really have not taken at least a public position on this issue. Okay.
Now, one other thing that I don't even know anything about, I'm looking at, this came from our newsletter. It said, Louisiana Legislature 2014. The Merry Christmas Bill. The bill
I forgot about that one.
Closely mirrors legislation passed into law in Texas, which allowed public school staff and students to celebrate Christmas and Hanukkah, et cetera, et cetera.
Right, I forgot about that one.
How did that one
come
out?
To tell you the truth, I haven't even been following that one, and I'll tell you why. It seems really silly, but that bill does absolutely nothing that federal law doesn't already require. Because it says specifically that you can celebrate Christmas as long as it's in a secular fashion. In other words, Santa Claus but not Jesus, and as long as you allow Hanukkah and menorahs and all of that. But that's already federal law.
Yeah.
And of course teachers are allowed to tell their students Merry Christmas. And any teacher who is reprimanded for doing that is wrongly reprimanded. And so that's really that bill is either based on ignorance of what the existing law is or just pure political posturing, because it will accomplish nothing. And so I haven't even been paying attention to it because it will make no difference one way or the other. All right.
Well, now, if we've covered the legislature, I'd like to talk about other instances that Louisiana A.C.L.U. Is involved in or concerned about. So, that would be of interest to our secular group.
Well, the most recent case that we had that actually got us worldwide attention, and a lot of the viewers may already know about it, was the case that we filed out of Sabine Parish in the western part of the state on behalf of a 12-year-old 6th grade boy of Buddhist faith whose 6th grade in public school course science teacher had an extra credit question on her test that said, "Isn't it wonderful what blank has made?" And of course, the answer that she wanted was an answer that this Buddhist child could not provide, consistent with his own faith. Of course, it was supposed to say God or the Lord or something like that, and this child couldn't do that. And but the entire climate of the school was, there was a portrait of Jesus outside the school office, and there were Bible verses on the sort of scrolling billboard. Public school, right, with Bible verses on the scrolling billboard. And when the parents complained particularly about this test, this kid was losing points for something that violated his religion. And they were told various things like, well, this is the Bible Belt, well, he should change his religion. This was a child of Asian descent who had been adopted into a Caucasian family, and the superintendent of schools offered to transfer him to another school that had more Asian students in it, and that was their solution to this violation of this child's faith. So, of course, we sued them. And they very quickly caved and entered into a very strong consent decree that required them, of course, to eliminate all of these religious messages in the school, and also provide training for all of the staff for a period of 10 years on is basically what the First Amendment requires in terms of separation of keeping religion out of the schools.
Now, are you satisfied that they are complying with that requirement?
Well, it's been very recent. It's only been a couple of months,
but they had time to remove all the religion.
Yeah, they did that immediately.
Okay.
They did that immediately, and the first training I think is scheduled for shortly before the start of the new school year. So they haven't had it yet, but we have every reason to believe that they understand that the federal court was serious about this. They signed off on it, and obviously we'll pay attention. We're going to be monitoring it.
Do you have any idea whether in that same school science class was teaching evolution and not creationism?
Well, we know that in this one class, the teacher said that evolution was impossible. And so on and so forth. Whether she was, yes, I believe that she said that she believes in creationism. I don't know whether she was actually teaching it or whether she was simply saying this is what she believes and denigrating, but evolution, she said, was impossible.
I see. Well, did the school do anything about that teacher? Do you know?
Well, I don't. As far as I know, she still has her job, if that's what you're asking.
Well, I don't know what I'm asking.
But I think everybody still has their job. But the school has, and the entire parish school system has signed on to this very long and detailed consent decree that acknowledges that they can't ever do this again.
Uh-huh.
So I'm assuming that this teacher got the lesson and learned what she's allowed and not allowed to do.
That's good.
We'll wait and see.
Okay. Are there other matters that A.C.L.U. of Louisiana is concerned about?
Well, I wish I could say no, but if I said no, that means we've worked ourselves out of a job,
and
we're not so lucky.
Pending, or?
Well, we're always working on some things that we can't disclose. So
that's what this show is for. Disclose.
Right. Tell you, spill our secrets. No, I'm not going to spill our secrets. We do have some other kind of religion-related things that we're working on. We're always concerned about students who are not allowed to form GSAs, gay straight alliance clubs in schools.
Okay.
That happens often. We had a complaint by a high school student recently who's and the law is very clear on this. If the school allows any non-curricular club, they have to allow all of them. Yeah. But often, principals will refuse to allow a GSA or any kind of support group for gay students. They say that they don't want clubs that are about sex, but of course GSAs are not about sex. They're just about support for peers and learning about diversity and all kinds of other things. And that's a recurring problem, and we have a letter that we send. It's kind of a standard letter.
So you advise the school that what they're doing is
against the law, right?
And your experience has been that they then correct what they were doing.
Usually, but it requires the students to be willing to confront the principal, and that's a hard thing for a kid to do. So when we have a brave, courageous, strong-willed student, and also you have to have a faculty sponsor. For all any student club, you have to have a faculty sponsor.
Do those gay organizations have a hard time getting a faculty sponsor?
Some do, some don't. But the most recent one that we had, there was a teacher who was willing to be a faculty sponsor.
Yes.
And they went to the principal, and the principal wouldn't approve it. And what the kids did, because kids are always smarter than the adults anyway, and so they just started meeting informally without school recognition anyway. So they're just going about doing what they were going to do anyway. But they want the school to give them the same official status as the chess club and the whatever kind of club, and they're legally entitled to that. And so we may come back. They kind of say, well, it's too close to the end of the school year now anyway. Let's start again in the fall and see if we can.
You're talking about a particular school or several?
Well, right now it's one in particular. It has come up. Every year or two we get the same issue. Different schools around the state, but it's the same issue. And generally speaking, we get the schools to understand. A lot of times they really just don't know what the law is. And, if they don't know, you can't fault them for not knowing, but then it's our job to educate them.
Which I'm sure you're happy to do.
Happy to do, that's right.
Well, are there other gay issues that, other than that school group, that have come up, recently?
Well, there was the other, this is another horrible legislative failure, which was a bill to provide statewide non-discrimination. This is Representative Pat Smith, who carries all of the tough bills, and she carried the sodomy repeal, and they stomped all over for that. And she carried a really good global non-discrimination bill that would have covered disability and LGBT status and all kinds of other things.
And this was non-discrimination, in government and hiring or generally?
Not hiring. This was global housing, public accommodations, employment, everything. I mean, basically a law to require the state of Louisiana to treat everybody fairly, which ought not to be, so controversial, but that one failed. And that was again, it was the religious right. It was the Louisiana Family Forum came in, and they started talking about, this is not morally neutral. And of course the big thing, as they say, is that it would require somebody to violate their own religious beliefs. Because if your own religious beliefs tell you that homosexuality is a sin, it's a violation of your religion to actually afford, equal rights to somebody else.
I see. Well, I thought the Christian principle was those without sin should cast the first stone. But they're casting stones, aren't they? All right.
Well, I'm not going there, Harry.
All right. Well, what else is happening that ACLU is concerned about or involved in?
Well, that's pretty much the range of it. If we could solve, if we could solve the war on drugs, if we could solve the over-incarceration problem, if we could create equal rights for LGBT members of the community, and stop religious bullying, we'd be in good shape.
I see. Well, that's your job, isn't it?
That's right, and we're trying as hard as we can.
All right. Now, since that is the obligation of the Louisiana A.C.L.U., tell us about, how are you funded and how do you operate? What is your organization? How does it comprise?
Well, thank you for asking that question, Harry. The ACLU is a national organization. It has a staffed office in every state. It's the only sort of civil rights organization that has a paid staff in every state. But of course, Louisiana, it's very tough for us to raise money here. And so the beauty of the ACLU is that it's kind of like an income tax redistribution system. The states that can raise a lot of money for civil liberties kind of pay into a fund, and then there's also an independent endowment for that fund that goes into the national office. And then states like Louisiana get a guaranteed sum of money to keep our
From the
doors
national
open.
ACLU.
Because otherwise, we can't raise enough money locally to, keep the light bill paid, let alone.
There are so many nonprofit organizations, in Louisiana and New Orleans that seem to be gathering large sums of money.
Well, it's not coming to us. I wish it would. We do rely also very considerably on donations, and we do have, a number of very generous supporters who help us a lot.
And but you also have a membership.
But we have a membership. We have two arms. We have, for the legal geeks, we have the C4, which is the lobbying arm, and that's, the card-carrying ACLU thing. That you become a member in the ACLU, and that funds our legislative work. And then we have but that's not tax deductible. And then we have the people who want to give us tax deductible money, for which we're very grateful.
Yes.
We have the C3, for which you can take a tax deduction, and that funds the litigation and the public education, the advocacy, all this work that we've been talking about for the lawsuits, the GSA outreach work, all of that.
If you had more money, how would you use it?
Whew, well, it depends on how much, Harry.
Well, if you had considerably more.
If we had considerably more money, I would do two things. I would beef up our legislative presence, and I would also beef up what we call the advocacy work, which is the work that's not tied to specific legislation, but that is tied to kind of public education about legal rights and educating city councils, parish governments, not lobbying specific bills, but just sort of about, generally speaking, what the problems are and what they can and cannot do.
I see. Well, much of what you do is influenced by what happens in Baton Rouge. Do you have a Baton Rouge office?
Well, we don't have an office in Baton Rouge. We do have two things there. We have a part-time staff person there who covers not the legislature, but what goes on in the Baton Rouge community as just as another city. So he goes to parish council meetings and coalition partner meetings to deal with, because Baton Rouge is a big city and there's a lot that happens there. And so we have a staff person, and we also have a part-time staff person in Shreveport to do the same thing up there.
I was going to ask about Shreveport.
Yeah, so we have two part-time field reps, to cover these two other major cities in our state.
Okay.
But we also have a part-time contract lobbyist who does our on-the-ground legislative work for us.
All right. Now, the people you have in Baton Rouge and Shreveport, are they attorneys or not?
No. Well, the one in Baton Rouge is an attorney. The one in Shreveport is not. Being an attorney was not a requirement for the position. He just happened to be the best guy for the job, and so he is.
Okay. Now,
but it's not a litigation job. It's a sort of public education job.
Marjorie, I think we've got less than a minute left. Is there something you want to tell the folks out there?
We try as hard as we can. We're a small organization. We don't have enough money. We do the best we can, and it's really hard. You know this. We know this. It's hard to fight this fight in a state that is so heavily religious in so much of what it does. So thank you.
Thank you, Marjorie. Thank you, folks, for being with us. Come back again often. perspective presented by the New Orleans Secular Humanist Association, following our few principles of humanism.
We're committed to the use of science and reason for understanding the universe and for solving human problems. We're skeptical of untested claims of knowledge, but we're open to new ideas.
We are concerned with securing justice and fairness in society and in ending intolerance and discrimination. We are committed to the total separation of religion and government.
We affirm humanism as a realistic alternative to the theologies of despair and the ideologies of violence. We reject the concept of an afterlife and believe in living a full and rewarding life here and now.
We value and respect each individual's right to judge and lead their lives according to their own position, as long as it's respectful of other people, living in a free society.
We hope you enjoy today's program and others in the weeks to follow. Hello again, folks. I'm Harry Greenberger. You know, I've been hosting this show for quite some time. And not too long ago, there was a very large, impressive article in the Times-Picayune. And as you can see, it was a lengthy article that had great prominence. And the caption read, "Without God, all we have is our belief in nothing." And so I read the article and I said, this man who wrote the article is talking about me and all of my friends and associates in the Secular Humanist Association. And I think, you know, I'd like to talk with him and disagree with a lot of the points he made. And so my guest today is the author of that article, and it is Reverend Philip Neri Powell.